Y'all, we're going to go ahead and we're on our last leg of our seminar. I didn't take questions before the break, so I'm going to go ahead. Everybody get hyped up on sugar and caffeine out there? Or? I thought those cookies were very sweet. Any questions that you have? Emily said that there's somebody in the back that had a question. Yes.
Yes, I work for the grass patch. I just wanted clarification on the documentation that is required for whenever they go home for the 3-month period.
Sure.
And what all is needed for that.
So when they go home, you want to make sure that you pay their subsistence. So the subsistence fees and the subsistence fees are $15.88 per day for food with no receipts, or up to $59 a day with receipts. So whatever their estimated meals are going to be, you'll want to pay them with a check or get a receipt signed for what you paid them if you gave them cash. But you want to give them money for the subsistence going back. They do check on that in an audit or investigation. And then I recommend paying their bus fare online. And you want to have proof that you paid for their transportation. Also, their last check. Make sure they get their last check, because a lot of times they won't have a forwarding address. So just making sure that you have proof that you paid their return transportation and subsistence. Usually they'll get there within 24 hours. And in Mexico, they stay on the bus straight through to wherever they're going. The bus doesn't hardly stop. They might stop in a major city, to let people off and let other people on. But they'll usually keep a pretty straight shot through to where they're going. So, and you can pay for that here right to their hometown. So you should have proof of all of that. This is not in the handbook, but it's something that I end up telling clients a lot, and I should put it in there. What I thought you were going to ask was not what you asked. So that's when, on the back end, when they fulfilled their job offer and they're going home. But sometimes they have to go home during their employment. Anibal was just telling me this was real unfortunate, that there was a death in the family of one of his employers that he got workers for. There was a death in the family and he had to go home. The employer is not required to pay that. The employee has to pay that. But whenever an employee is going out and coming back in, you as the employer should give them a letter on your company letterhead saying this worker by name, whatever their name is, has permission from the employer to go home for a family emergency, in this case it was Guatemala, that they have your permission to go home. They've had a family emergency. They should be there about 2 or 3 weeks, whatever it's going to be. And then their job is waiting for them when they come back after, being with their family for this family emergency. If they have that letter, I've never had anybody that had that letter have problems at the port of entry or at the border coming back in. Because the visas are what they call multiple entry visas. They've got an M on there, and that M stands for multiple entry. And so that means they can go out and come in several times. But if they don't have that letter, sometimes CBP at the border will think that they're just gallivanting around and that they've absconded, and they won't let them in. If they really don't feel like it's legitimate that they are down there for good reason, they can deny them entry back in the country. And so, and I have seen that happen. So not with us, but with others that got stuck out of the country, that my clients had that problem with other processors. Ours are all of our processors do all multiple entry visas, because I ask them to. And so if there's an emergency, they can go out. You don't have to pay that transportation, but you should give them a letter authorizing them to be out of the country for a period of time and then come back, give a reason why, and put your name and number of the person in charge saying, if you have any questions concerning their employment or this letter, feel free to give me a call. And I've never seen there be a problem coming back in the country. Yes, Mike.
Not the same with Mexican workers?
Yes, multiple entry visa, and you know, they can just take a bus or drive their car a lot of times, but same thing. They still have to go through the port of entry, might be Laredo, they're driving in, they're going to show them that visa, and they know it's multiple entry, but if they don't have reason to believe, or if they don't really believe, it's like the consulate. The consulate can turn them down for any reason. So can CBP. They can just believe they're not legit, something doesn't smell right, you know, it doesn't pass the smell test, and they cannot let them back in the country. So, but if they have that letter on the employer's letterhead giving them permission to go visit their family, and they have a multiple entry visa, I've never had them have any problem at the border. Any other questions? Anybody? All right. Well, you might have some more after we get into some other things here. I wanted to go over the orientation and what you do in the orientation. And by the way, I expect Solstice to be here at any time. They're another processor that's coming up, so I'm going to give them 15 minutes when they get here. But in the meantime, I'm just going to continue going through the seminar materials. So you should do a worker orientation when the workers get here, or as soon after they get here as possible. You'll want to go over any questions you would have if you were coming from a foreign country up to an employer that you never met before. You should go through, you know, your company and what the job is, and some of your policies and things like that. Do it as soon as they arrive. Explain your desire. I think it's a good idea to explain that you want to have a good and long-lasting relationship. Tell them, I think right up front you should say, take your visa out, look on your visa, because your company name is on their visa, right? And so if it's ABC Landscaping, say, we're ABC Landscaping and we petitioned to bring you up. And we're so happy you're here because we want to train you and we want to give you a good job here and we want to bring you back year after year. We want this to be a long-term relationship that with you coming back up, and we can bring you year after year. And so we want to make sure that all your questions are answered, that you have a good experience working for our company, and just make them feel good about that you are happy to see them and you are invested in this, that you applied for the visas and you're looking forward to a long-term relationship. Explain that they can only legally work for your company. And you can say, you know, one reason I pointed that out is because our name is on that visa, you can only legally work for our company. Don't let any other company out there talk you into working for them, because that's illegal immigration. You know, you're not authorized to work for any other company but us. And if they catch you doing that, they'll deport you. So, you know, I want to warn you against that, because sometimes people come, they'll make you offers. You know, why don't you come to work for us and everything? You can't legally work for them. And so that kind of sets the tone right up front, that you're their employer, you're their only employer, you know, and don't fall for anything else. Explain that you have to go through the process each year. You have to pay for them to come in on that, but that you will and you want to bring them up year after year. Explain the reporting requirements and say one thing that you need to know is that if you're sick, you need to call our HR person and tell her that you're sick, because if you're gone for 5 days and we don't hear from you, we're required to report you as absconded, and you might just be sick. And once we report you, we're required to do that, they'll cancel your visa. And so we don't want that. So if you're not going to be coming to work, be sure to call this person and tell them you're sick or something like that, and that we know why you're not at work. You know, because there's a reporting requirement. If somebody, you know, takes off, or if they quit, we're required to report that so that the government will cancel the visa. And we don't want to wrongly or by mistake cancel your visa. It kind of lets them know up front that, that there can be repercussions for doing the wrong thing, and certainly for absconding or going to work for somebody else. A lot of times they will get offers from other people, especially you got some companies out there that are paying $20 an hour for day labor, because they're desperate for labor, and they see your guys out there, and they might ask them, how much are you getting paid? And you say $17 an hour, and they say, well, if you come to work for me, I'll pay you $20 an hour. That's kind of tempting for these workers. But if they know up front that will get them in trouble and they'll be disqualified from using the program anymore, they'll have an incentive not to do it. And, so kind of explain some of this stuff. Discuss the work hours, vacation policy, the 3/4 guarantee, so you might tell them, we are required to provide you with at least 3/4 of the work hours every 3 months on average that is on this job order that we're giving you. And so if there's a rain day, if we have 2 days where it's raining and we can't work, we'll try to make those hours up on the good days, but the government knows that there are going to be rain days and things like that, so we don't pay on rain days, but we'll try to make those hours up. If we don't make them up, we have to make up at least 3/4 of the hours on the job order every 3 months. So let them know, just like those workers thought that they were getting stolen from when the employer was deducting taxes, they'll know that if you don't pay them the full 40 hours, that's okay as far as your terms of employment, as far as the government's concerned. You're not ripping them off. There can be rain days, and they don't get paid for rain days, but you'll try to make those hours up. Those are things that might kind of get them a little upset, but if they understand that's how it works up front, then they won't be surprised when they don't get paid for a rain day. You should explain what the pay is, and you should explain that there will be taxes taken out, and if there's any deductions taken out, give them a heads up. So we are required to take out income tax, Social Security, Medicare. They might not know that they qualify for Social Security, and so Social Security is like a pension for them. They can actually live on that. So when you explain to them, hey, yeah, they're going to take a little bit out of your check each pay period, but if you come to work for us for 40 quarters, which is about 15 years, you can collect a Social Security check. And, it's a good amount of money from the time you're 65 for the rest of your life. So things like that they wouldn't know. And you might tell them, we'd love to bring you up for 15 years straight. We'd love to see you come in year after year. And I do have employers that have been bringing workers for 25, 30 years or more. Same workers. How to cash their checks. Some employers will cash them for them. Some of these check cashing places are rip-offs. They're charging them too much. There's some that are more economical and fair. Tell them how to get their checks cashed. Loans. If you do loans, how do you do that? I don't really recommend loans. If there are loans, they need to be disclosed as a benefit. Loans up to X number of dollars on the front end to be deducted. So a lot of times, some way that employers do it, instead of an advance against pay, they'll do a loan. These workers have been coming to work for them for 20 years. But they come up and they're short of cash because they've been down in Mexico for 3 months. They come up, they don't have any money, and they'll say loans up to $500 during the first week of employment to be paid back at $100 per paycheck over the first 5 paychecks or something like that. Just gives them some upfront money. You don't have to do loans. I prefer the advance against pay because then you're not out any money. If the loan didn't get paid back like it should be. But so an advance against pay keeps their needs supplied, but they're having to earn it first. But if you're doing either one of those, explain how it works to them so that they understand up front. Hey, if I need some money, I know I can get it, or at the end of the workday, I know I'm not going to go hungry. I'm going to have some money to not only buy my dinner, but maybe a taco in the morning for breakfast, and be able to get a lunch taco the next day or something. And housing arrangements. They need to know where are they going to sleep that night? Do you have low-cost employer housing? Are they going to stay at the extended stay? How many of them can stay per room? How much is it? Do they pay weekly? How's that going to work? Make sure that any of these arrangements are thought about up front and that they're on the job order, as mentioned earlier. Transportation. How are they going to get to work? I mentioned to you a lot of new employers just Uber them to work now. But you might want to just send a company van by. Let's say the extended stay is right down the street from your yard. And there's no sense in them even coming down to the yard because the crew leaders load the trucks and gas them up and everything. And so you can just say, hey, the truck will be by there to pick you up. Some workers show up at 7 o'clock, but you can just stay there at the extended stay and we'll pick you up at 7:30 or whatever on our way out. And that way you're not paying them a half hour unnecessarily. But however you do that, just explain how they're going to get to work or transportation. That you will be taking them to the job sites. Once you're on the truck will take you to all the different job sites you're going to work in that day and bring you back to the extended stay or back to the yard. So that they know how transportation is going to work. You might also explain, if they don't have their own cars, they haven't been coming for a few years, how are they going to get groceries and stuff? A lot of times a good way to do that is on payday. Have somebody designated, one of your crew leaders that you pay by the hour, to take them down to the store, to the grocery store, and maybe to the Walmart, to go in there with their pay and buy whatever they need, to take back to their place. Somebody that can take them to do that once a week. These are just practical things that anybody would need to know. How are my needs going to get met? And, once they know the drill, and you might even put it down in writing to remind them, then they'll just do it automatically. But they're going to need to buy stuff, they're going to need groceries, they're going to need clothing and all that type of stuff. Another thing they'll want to know, I didn't put this on here, they'll want to know how to wire the money down to their family. After they get paid, the main thing they want to do is be wiring as much money as possible down to their family. There's a lot of these envíos de dinero, and everything in these stores, supermercados and everything where they do that stuff. Some of them might be a little bit more of a ripoff than other ones. Try to find out, who's doing that, who they're using, and then let them know, where they can send money down to their family. Company policies and performance write-ups. You can tell them, look, here's our company policies. You can go over some of the basics, but you can say, it's an 8-hour day. We take a break for lunch. If you take a break during the morning and during the afternoon, let them know how that works. Otherwise, we expect everybody to be working and on the job. If there are performance issues, we'll let you know. And the first time we'll give you a verbal warning. And if the same thing occurs again, we'll give you something in writing, as a reminder. And if it persists, we might have to have a longer talk. But we expect it to be a good working relationship. We don't expect that, but that's how it works. If there are performance issues, we'll let you know. Introduce your main staff. Here's so-and-so, this is the owner of the company. Here's the HR manager, that's the person to talk to if you have questions about your paycheck. She's also the person to talk to if you're sick and not coming into work. If you don't come in, what's the sick pay arrangement? If they don't come in, do they have a certain amount of earned sick pay, or do they just lose that time? Is there health insurance? Are there other benefits? Explain the benefits. Inform workers of the when they get paid, how much they get paid, and how payroll works. Inform the workers of the return transportation requirement and their duty to return home after the period of employment. Get it in writing, signed by the worker, that you have paid for that. And so when they come, pay for their transportation, if you haven't already paid it through the processor, and get a receipt or get it in writing that you paid for it. Same thing on the return transportation at the end of work. Get it in writing that you paid for it. If you have a receipt, that'll work. Explain what may result in termination. There's certain things that you should have in writing that they know are likely to result in termination. Physical violence, drunkenness, drug use, things like that. These are things we don't put up with, during work hours. And so if you get into a fight with another worker, that could, result in termination. Theft, vandalization or whatever. Things that could result in termination. We don't expect those things to happen, but if they do, we consider that serious. Explain if an employee leaves early or has to return home voluntarily that the worker forfeits pay and must obtain written permission. They can't just take off. Just so you know, a lot of times employers want to keep them till the end of December. It's very hard to do because Christmas is a big deal down there in Mexico, and they have parades and all kinds of festivities and stuff, and a lot of times about December 20th or 21st or 22nd they're just going to go. So it's good to have a policy that if they're going to leave early that they need to let you know or get permission. Inform workers how to obtain permission and authorization letters for emergency home visits. I went over that earlier. Get a letter that shows that they have permission to go down there for their family emergency or whatever's going on. A lot of employers will allow their workers to stagger little vacation times. So after they've been there for 3 months, or 4 months, maybe they'll let the worker, if they have a policy to do so, they'll say, if you would like to, after being here for 3 months, you can go home and see your family if you want. We allow a week or we allow 2 weeks or whatever it is to go see your family. You don't have to do that. But if you do it, transportation's on you, and it's not paid vacation time. So a lot of employers will allow their workers to stagger that. They can't all go at one time, but maybe they'll allow up to 25% to go 1 week, and then the other ones to go another week or something like that to go see their families. I don't really recommend it, but a lot of people do it. If you do it, let them know what the policy is, so they don't try to do it, on their own, and they know they've got that coming. If you don't, the workers, most of them are happy to just stay the whole time, barring a family emergency. Review your policies and procedures. At the orientation, make sure you copy their visa, passport, and I-94. They don't give I-94s automatically anymore. You have to print them off online. So they'll stamp their passport that they've come through the port of entry, but to get the I-94, which they're required to carry on them at all times, you have to go to the CBP website, put in the petition number and the person's name, and you'll be able to print off their I-94. They're required to keep that on them along with their passport and visa at all times. So 3 things they have to have on them at all times: their passport, visa, and I-94. The visa's in the passport, but the I-94 needs to be folded up and put in the passport as well. You cannot hold their passport and visa from them. A lot of times employers would take it and put it in the safe because they thought that kept them from absconding or something like that. You're not allowed to do that. You can copy them, but the employee is required to keep those on their person at all times. That can be a problem. I had a client that had one of the trucks stolen, and all his workers' passports and visas were in the glove box, because they didn't want to have sweat on them in their work clothes and everything, so they put them in the glove box, and the truck got stolen. So they had to get new passports and visas. But usually there's not a problem, and they do need to have those, but you can copy them. You also have to I-9 these workers. Everybody know what an I-9 is. So that's proof of authorization to work. An H2B worker is authorized to work in the United States. So you do have to I-9 them just like any other employee. And you use their passport and their visa as work authorization documents in there. Make sure you fill out an I-9 right when they get there during orientation. Have the worker sign a letter showing that they have paid no prohibited fees to any person as a condition of coming to work for your company. You maybe have their name already written under the signature line. Have them sign that, have it in Spanish, have them give that to you, put it in their employee file. Get Social Security numbers for all workers. This is something I've had people go months without getting the Social Security numbers for their workers. You should immediately get them down to the Social Security office. A lot of times you can get a number within 2 to 4 days from the Social Security office, but the worker has to request it. So when they go through to get their Social Security card or number, they, if they're new workers, if they're old workers, they already have their Social Security card. But if they go in as new workers and they fill out the application and everything, if they will request the number as soon as it becomes available, they will have it within 2 to 4 days. They'll tell them, come back by and we'll give you the number, not the card, but the number. And I've never had it where the number didn't match the number on the card. And they'll warn them, this is not guaranteed to be the number that you get on the card, but I've never had it not match. If they don't ask for that number, they won't even tell them they can get it. And they will not give it to the employer, they will only give it to the worker. And so you should tell them, how many of you have a Social Security card or number, and you find out, are there any of you that are new and have never worked in the United States, and they raise their hand, say, we're going to have to get your Social Security number. That's required, and we'll go down and get you that based on your visa here. Get a driver's license if you want. Any workers that come up can get a driver's license. If they've never tested, they're going to have to take the tests, the driving test and the written test. And so, but they can get a driver's license, but it's only good for the period of the visa. So it will expire on their end date of employment. They'll have to the next year get it revalidated each year. They won't have to take all the tests again, but they will have to get a new license issued each year when they come back up. And they can usually do that online. Go over the housing arrangements, transportation, food arrangements. Give each worker a copy of the job order. I showed you all that earlier. The job order is it's a one-page document. It's what you post on your bulletin board or in 2 conspicuous places during the recruitment period. It lists the job duties, the pay, the hours of work, the dates of employment, the employer, what are the benefits, what are the deductions. It's all on that one-page job order. And that when you're doing recruitment, you post that. And when the workers get here, you give them a copy of this in their language. It doesn't do them any good in English. So you take this Word document, copy it, put it on a blank document, or translate it, basically. Highlight it, translate it, and then it'll give you the translation. Print that out as a job order, and that'll be in Spanish. Have the worker sign a company policy statement if there is a company policy statement. Make sure you pay their visa fees, transportation, and daily subsistence so you don't forget to do that. I think it's best to do it right when they get there. You can wait to pay the transportation and visa fee. You can wait on that up to 50% of the employment. And the worker's duties, they do have to pay taxes. They do have to work the job and work full-time employment. They can't just be part-time workers. They do have to. They do not are not allowed to work for other employers, even part-time. They should not work outside the area of intended employment. They should not perform other job duties than those listed on the job order, especially when it has to do with, say, a whole different area of work like construction, maybe instead of landscaping. So they have to be doing the proper job duties. They have to be working in the area of employment. They should not. They are required to leave the U.S. when the period of employment is over. They have to obey the laws. H2B worker provides for his own housing, food, transportation from home to work. By that I mean from where they live in the U.S. to work. Then you transport them to the job sites, and other necessities. The H2B workers' rights poster should be handed out as well, or they should be told that their workers' rights poster is by the time clock or wherever it is. The Affordable Care Act is only required for employers with more than 50 employees. And so if you're under 50 employees, you're not under the requirements to provide health insurance under the Affordable Care Act. There are differing definitions of seasonality. The Affordable Care Act calls a seasonal worker anybody who works 6 months or less. H2B, it's up to 9 months is a seasonal worker. So the definitions are different for the Affordable Care Act and for H2B purposes. But H2B workers do count as employees, but they are not normally seasonal workers under the Affordable Care Act. So they're basically treated as full-time workers, usually, unless you're bringing them up for less than 6 months. You must offer the same benefits on the same terms as U.S. workers. So sometimes there's a provision in there, that you have to work for 3 months or 6 months before you can apply for the insurance. Most H2B workers will not take any health insurance if they have to pay any part of it, because they want their full paycheck. And so a lot of times employers aren't offering the insurance to them. They do have to offer the insurance, but if they're paying any part of it, they won't take it. And so don't worry about offering it to them. Now, if you pay 100% of it, for your other employees, you would have to pay 100% of it for them, but most of my employers, very few, are paying 100% of the health insurance. And usually the waiting period is disqualifying for a lot of them anyway. So keep in mind that if insurance is offered to the U.S. workers, it has to be offered on the same terms to the foreign workers. There are illegalities that go on. I don't have my clients caught up in these things, but sometimes people can do things that are not legal and not realizing they're doing it. I mentioned how I had an employer who sold their business and just let the workers go work for the new business, but it was an asset sale, and so it wasn't a successor in interest, and those workers were not allowed to work for that new employer. But they thought they weren't doing anything wrong because they'd sold the business, so they thought the H2B workers just went with the business, but it's not that way. And so a lot of times there's illegal acts that people think they're doing things right but haven't really checked into it. But there are other things that are more glaringly illegal. People that are recruiting workers who have worked or been present illegally in the United States. It's not legal to try to legalize illegal workers through a visa program. So let's say you were a landscape employer who was using undocumented workers, but you've decided, hey, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to have all my workers legal so I can sleep well at night, and I'm not worried about ICE showing up. And so I'm going to send all my illegal workers down to the consulate. I'm going to apply for H2B visas for them and send them down there, and I'll run them through the consulate. They'll get H2B visas, and then my illegal workers won't be illegal anymore. They'll be legal workers. That's illegal. Okay, you can't do that. You can't legalize illegal workers using a visa program. If they find out you're doing that, they'll cancel your entire application at the consulate. And so what you can do is you can have, let's say you have 3 workers, and it's pretty clear to you that their Social Security cards were created in a flea market, right? And that y'all have never talked about it. It's like don't ask, don't tell, But I kind of think Juan's not here legally. Anyway. You might tell Juan, okay, we're getting H2B visas, and Juan says, can I get a visa? Then you got to kind of say, well, Juan, I'm not sure that you're here legally, but if you're here legally, like I've been assuming you are, why do you need a visa? right? And but I'll tell you what, I can bring your brothers and your cousins and your friends, but I can't send you down there because I'm under the impression that you're here legally because you showed me a Social Security card, and a driver's license, and so anyway, a lot of them are getting those things in flea markets, and so you can't send Juan down there if he's supposed to be here legally to get an H2B visa, because why would he need that? So anyway, you can't legalize those illegal workers, but you can bring their friends up. I had a company, huge concrete company, concrete foundations, commercial concrete foundations and everything. And he had all these illegal workers working for him. And he wanted to apply for H2B visas, 100 and something H2B visas. And I said, look, you can't take undocumented workers and run them through a visa program. No, I wouldn't do that. And I said, I'm serious. You can get in a lot of trouble. Don't try it. And he says, no, I won't try it. And so he's lying to me. And so he sent all those illegal workers down there to the consulate, without telling me. And but he had one of the foremen go down there with him, who was undocumented himself. He was furious about the whole thing, that he was involved in that. He didn't want to go down there because he'd have to, if it didn't work, he'd have to pay a coyote to come back. And he was really mad. And so they all went into the consulate, and he told them everything, yeah. And they busted the employer. He didn't get any criminal charges, but they canceled his application, and all those workers were stuck down there in Mexico illegally, and having to pay the coyotes, to get back up. And I told him not to do it, and he told me he wouldn't. But anyway, you just don't want to do that. You can't sell visas, of course. That's actually a felony. That's considered human trafficking. So selling of visas, even to the worker, so that's coming up. So if people are charging the worker for a visa, that's illegal. You can't sell visas to anybody, and of course you can't sell visa workers to anybody. That's human trafficking. Issued to you or to your company, you can't sell those to other companies or individuals. You can't apply for visas for companies that don't exist. There's a lot of that going on. Shell companies, fake companies, and they're bringing up workers and then, saying here's a legal worker to work for you, when, that company that supposedly is applying them for them doesn't even exist. Telling workers to be dishonest on their non-immigrant visa application at the U.S. consulate. The U.S. consulate is real tricky about interviewing these workers. They haven't been interviewing as many since COVID, but they do tricky stuff. Some of the stuff we've caught them doing. They'll tell the worker, they'll ask them questions. Have you ever been in the United States illegally and everything? And the worker say, no, I've never been there illegally. And they'll say, wait here a moment, I want to go check the computer. And they go around the corner and they drink a Coca-Cola, and they come back and they say, Juan, you're in a lot of trouble. You're going to go to jail unless you tell us everything right now, about being in the United States and everything. And really, they don't know anything about him. And Juan starts saying, oh, yeah, my employer told me to come down here and lie to y'all and, tell you I'd never been in the United States, And the consulate can't put Juan in jail anyway. He's a Mexican citizen. It's the U.S. consulate. But now the employer's in trouble, right? So they're going to let Juan go, and they're going to cancel the employer's application and report them. And again, the employer would probably just have the application canceled, but you don't want to be involved in that. So you don't want to tell the workers to be dishonest and say they've never been illegally in the United States. You don't want to obtain false documents for workers in the United States. You don't want to sub out workers to other companies. However, there's a legal way to sub out workers. And so if you've got, you don't have enough work for the workers, you lost a contract, but a buddy of yours who has a landscape company, he's short of labor, he works in the same area as you do, he does the same type of work, you can say, look, my workers are a little short on time, because I lost the contract, so I'm giving them like 30 hours. If you have 10 hours of work for them in that same subdivision where we're working or same area of employment, I'll keep them on my payroll. You can pay me an extra $1 an hour for them, you know, and we'll do a subcontract agreement. If they stay on your payroll, they're doing the same type of work in the same area of intended employment, and you've got a contract with that other company to do landscaping work for them. That's just another contract. And you can, you know, as long as they stay on your payroll, that's legal. You have to still maintain some supervision that they're doing landscaping work and they're doing it in the right area of intended employment, but as long as they're doing landscaping work and they're on your payroll, that's going to be a valid contract for landscaping work. And then, but you don't want to be subbing them out and saying, here, I don't need these 20 workers, they can go to work for you and you just pay me money. They can't go on that other company's payroll even if they're doing the same type of work in the same area. Charging workers a fee for their visa, that's not allowed. Attempting to obtain H2B workers for undocumented workers who are presently in the United States, we said that. Failing to inform USCIS or DOL of any change in the terms of employment of any H2B worker, including job duties, rate of pay, job location, and termination or absconding. Providing false or misleading information intending to be filed with or submitted to any government agency. Placing workers in geographic locations to work in other than those applied for on the ETA 9142, so they can't work outside of the area of intended employment. Paying workers or other wages than the wage submitted to DOL on the ETA 9142 application, so you have to be paying the right wage. Allowing workers to perform job duties other than those applied for. Allowing workers to remain employed beyond the dates of their visa expiration. This goes on more times than I would like to know, but employers saying, oh, we've got a lot of work, I don't want them to go home yet, I'm just going to keep them here and pay cash, you know, for another 3 weeks beyond their employment. If they interview those workers and find out that's going on, that's a problem. So you want them to go home when they're supposed to go home. There can be extensions. They're getting a lot harder to get, and we charge for them. But it has to be something you could not have foreseen and beyond your control. Failing to withhold and pay all required state and federal taxes. Failing to obtain a passport for each worker in his or her country of origin. Failing to obtain valid Social Security numbers for them. Failing to correctly and fully meet all I-9 requirements. Failing to comply with all federal, state, and local laws and requirements related to employment of H2B workers. Failing to list any special requirements for H2B workers on the labor certification. If you have any questions about the legalities of any aspect of the H2B program, call your attorney, call me or your legal assistant, and we'll help you do things correctly. The Fair Labor Standards Act applies to all employees in the United States, whether legal or illegal. Did y'all know that? So illegal workers are protected by the Fair Labor Standards Act, and they can actually get relief through the government even though they're here illegally. So the Fair Labor Standards Act and wage and hour law applies to all workers that are involved in interstate commerce. So if you buy something that was produced in another state, you're involved in interstate commerce. It applies to all U.S. employees. There are employees versus subcontractors. Most employees are required to be hourly employees. So that has to do with whether they're going to be hourly or salaried, exempt or non-exempt. And I meant to take that piece rate out, that you don't have to worry about that. So we looked into doing piece rate for H2B workers at one time. It's really too much of a hassle, and the hourly rate is going to have to be met anyway. There are a number of statutes and sites here for that you can go to learn different stuff. There's one link to the H2B regulations. There is a new wage rule that you can link to, wage and hour facts, H2B facts, the Fair Labor Standards Act. You can look up the whole thing, regulations. that have to do with H2B, records that have to be kept by employers, executive, administrative, and professional exemptions. There's a link about those. Hours worked, you can figure out what hours you're required to be paying. Overtime compensation, when it's required, and child labor. Hours worked and overtime, there is a exhibit 23 if you want to study it a little bit better. But a lot of H2B employers are not paying for drive time that they are required to pay. And so a lot of times people think, well, I'll start the clock when they get to the first job site. If you're requiring them to get in that truck and meet you at the yard and drive to that job site, you're probably going to have to pay drive time. And especially if they're driving over, say, 35 to 45 miles, because that's more than a commute. But the way it goes is, if they do any work at the yard before driving to the first job site, you're definitely required to pay for the drive time because they've already started work. But even if they don't do any work, but the employer requires them to meet at the yard and to drive in the truck, that drive time is going to be compensable time. So the drive time from the shop to the job site, or drive time from the job site back to the shop, is compensable if any work is done at the shop before leaving or after returning, or the employer requires the employee to leave from or return to the shop in their transportation. And drive time from the shop to the first job site, or drive time from the last job site to the shop, is not required to be compensable if no work is done at the shop and the worker is free to use his own transportation to get to the first job site or to return home from the last job after the last job is finished. And so if you say, look guys, we'll give you a ride, or you can just take your own car and meet us at the job site over there, and here's the address, and we need to be there by this time. If they have the option of taking their own car and following you around to the job sites and then going home from the last job site, if they can do that, then you don't have to pay them for drive time. But if you're requiring them to be in the truck or to do work at the yard before they leave or when they get back, or if you just require them to drive in your truck, you're probably going to owe them drive time. It's a lot of employers are not paying that drive time. And they'll ding you for that. Wage and hour will if they figure out that's what's going on. If the commute to or from the job site is over 45 miles or minutes, everything over 45 should arguably be compensated because it's more than a normal commute. For further information, see DOL Wage and Hour Regulations 785. Some additional exhibits. Let me see where we're at here. 415. At 4:30, I think I saw Richie and Melissa come in. They're there. 15 minutes. We'll have y'all come up and share for about 15 minutes on their processing. So they've got offices down in Monterey and Laredo, and many of y'all have been here at previous seminars, so they're going to share about their services here in about 15 minutes. And then I'll close this up in the last 15 minutes. Before we do the additional exhibits, look at page 38. I want to go over the H2A visa program and some of the differences with H2B. This is relevant for H2B employers because a lot of you could be getting H2A workers, and H2A workers can come up for 10 months at a time. There's unlimited numbers of H2A workers. There are some requirements that are a little different than H2B, like you do have to pay for their housing, but there's a lot of things, like I'd said earlier, like grass farms, tree farms, nurseries, greenhouses, even ranches. I do a lot of hunting ranches, to where they bring workers on a hunting ranch, and I usually we'll end up going hunting there too. But H2A visa program allows foreign workers to fill agricultural job openings. So they do have to be something agriculturally related or ranch related. They are temporary, seasonal in nature. They're good for up to 10 months. We don't recommend you going the total amount of the 10 months, but 9 3/4 months or something like that. Come a little shy of the 10 months. We've had a few NODs come back for full 10 months saying that they want to make sure they weren't year-round. and when there's not sufficient or willing U.S. workers. What type of businesses can use H2A? Sod farms, nurseries, tree farms, ranches, with or without livestock, horticulture, crop farms, orchards, or hunting ranches. We do a lot of orchards, we do a lot of grass farms, tree farms, nurseries. What are the requirements? You have to be a U.S. agricultural business with seasonal positions 10 months out of the year or less. You must pay an adverse effect wage rate. So they don't have a prevailing wage. They have an adverse effect wage rate, which is a set rate for the whole state. Every state has a different adverse effect wage rate, and it's usually a few dollars an hour less than H2B, but you do have to pay for their housing. So it's usually a wash. You're probably paying about the same when you factor in the housing for an H2A worker with paid housing as an H2B worker where you don't have to pay the housing. You must provide free housing to the worker. You must provide workman's comp. You must offer the job to U.S. workers just like H2B. You must apply for and be approved. We have some exhibits in the back about H2A. It gives a fact sheet on general H2A information. Exhibit number 35. There is an H2A workers' rights poster that you have to post just like H2B. And there is a handout on prohibited retaliation for H2A. Very similar to the H2B program. I mentioned earlier that the first step is different. On H2A, it's an ETA 790. It has the housing inspection and everything in there. It's filed with the State Workforce Agency. With H2B, the first step is filing the prevailing wage request with Department of Labor. After that first step, all the steps are the same with H2A and H2B. It's an application for alien labor certification, 9142, B or A, and then the I-129. So much of the process is the same. A lot of the regulations are very similar as far as employer obligations. What's the process? We do represent H2A employers in the application process. It takes 75 to 90 days to get them up to work, usually about 75. Could be up to 90 with the consular processing. The application involves the State Workforce Agency, the U.S. Department of Labor, USCIS, and the U.S. Consulate. So those three agencies are involved in H2B too, but it's a little bit different the way you interact with the State Workforce Agency. We provide a step-by-step process with information letters just like H2B. We file the ETA 790. We help you with getting the housing inspection. There are new TDHCA fees and housing requirements. If the State Workforce Agency is inspecting the house, they don't do a double inspection, but if the State Workforce Agency doesn't inspect the house, then TDHCA inspects the house, and they charge you for it. The ETA 9142A is filed with DOL just like the ETA 9142B is filed for H2B workers. There's a notice of acceptance and U.S. recruitment just like H2B. There's a labor certification just like H2B with an I-129 filed with USCIS. But with H2A, it's automatically premium processed and there's no premium processing fee. Visa issuance and consular processing just like H2B. The costs are $3,700 per application. That's not per visa, but it's per position or per application. So if you have some for one position and another application for another position, there could be two applications. But if you're I have clients that do over 100 workers on one application, that's fine. And it's good to know that there's a new wage rule for H2A. And so if you're getting some duties in there that are a little more skilled or a little different than regular agricultural work, you could end up paying a different wage. It used to be all agricultural workers were just one wage. Now they've come out with a new wage rule. Most of those agricultural workers are just going to be the adverse effect wage rate. But if we pick up something in the job duties that could trigger one of those higher wages, we'll let you know. It's $100 per application and $10 per worker fee to the Department of Labor. It's a $460 petition fee to USCIS for a small employer, and then the higher fee for the larger employer. about $600 per worker for consular processing and transportation. Our fee does not include other costs, and housing that is free to the worker and workman's comp is required. The advantages of H2A are its very low cost labor with an adverse effect wage rate, and you don't have to pay overtime. It's dependable seasonal labor. You get to choose your workers. The same workers can return year after year. There's no overtime pay, no time and a half. Workers who want to work, dependable labor for these agricultural jobs. Unlimited numbers of visas. There's no cap. You're going to get your guys. No Social Security or Medicare deductions, and you can free up some U.S. workers for other duties. And so if you are bringing H2A workers in, say a lot of them, but you also have a landscape company, once the H2A workers get here, some of those nursery workers can then be moved into landscaping jobs. And so it can be a labor solution if you're caught in the cap or something like that, or the lottery. You know, those workers that are the U.S. workers, once the H2A workers get here, those can be freed up to do some other duties because the U.S. workers are fungible, whereas the visa workers are not. Does that make sense? So the U.S. workers can be moved around a little bit once the visa workers get here. And there's a new H2A wage rule, as I mentioned, for some specialized duties. New USCIS petition fees for H2B petitions. You can look back at those. We went over those. And so I'm going to go ahead and let Richie and Melissa via Real. So we go back many years as well. I used to do all my own visa processing down in Monterey. And so I'd be down there for 2 months and stay at the Crown Plaza down there, and we'd take hundreds of workers every day and process them through the consulate. And while I was down there, I met Richie and Melissa. They weren't married at the time, and we'd process workers all day, and then we'd go over and eat the Rey de Cabrito. We'd eat a bunch of goat at Rey de Cabrito. And it was a lot of fun, but I got so many clients that I couldn't go down there and be down there for 2 or 3 months. And so we'd gotten to know each other real well, and we started using them for processing our workers instead of me going down there. So I'm going to invite Richie and Melissa to go ahead and come on up and tell us what they do down there. Hey. Hey. Okay.
Good afternoon. Sorry we're a little late. We had some issues we had to take care of. We've been processing visas since 1998, and as Bob stated, Mr. Kershaw stated, we met him in Monterrey, and here we are today. We have an office in Laredo, Texas, and an office in Monterrey. We've been, like I said, processing visas since 1998. We also have a transportation company that's affiliated with our company for safe travel. U.S. DOT, U.S. drivers, and U.S. insurance. We have a staff with a lawyer in Monterrey. Our manager is a Mexican attorney, so if there's any problems over there, we have legal counsel in Monterrey. We're very well connected with the bridge system, the ICE, Border Patrol. We have great rapport. A lot of them I grew up with. And now they're supervisors, so when there's a problem with, it could be a 994, sometimes they get detained at the bridge for something that's not seen or foreseen at the consulate. So we have good rapport with the ICE and the bridge administrator. We also handle the appointments, and we also make sure that the workers get there on time. We're a no-nonsense company. We make sure that we're the go-between the workers and the employers. Our first priority is the employer, you guys. Without you guys, we don't have a job, and nor do the workers. So our first priority is you guys. We pride ourselves in making sure that the workers tell the truth and say the correct stuff on the application, the DS-160. As Mr. Kershaw mentioned, A lot of times, these workers will lie, and sometimes the government plays games, and they'll entice the worker to lie, to get a visa. And what Mr. Kershaw forgot to mention, if you hire a worker that was illegal, they go retroactive back and charge you back taxes and back wages on that salary. So it's very important, like Mr. Kershaw said, not to clean or wash or dry out those workers. So it's very important that your workers hadn't been with you guys, because they'll talk and the government will tell them make up stuff so they can get you guys, because they want to hurt. For some reason, the government doesn't like this program. We've had our battles as far as Kershaw with immigration, with the State Department. A lot of the unions hate this program because they haven't tapped into this market of charging monies to the workers, dues. Let me pass it to my wife real quick.
I just wanted to let you know that we work on getting your appointments as soon as possible. So once you get your approval and you send it to us, we'll get back to you within the day or 2 days to try and get you the fastest appointment that we can get. Of course, it all depends on the availability of the consulate by the time you send us everything that we need, all the forms that are filled out, everything that should be filled out correctly with all the names and phone numbers and passport numbers. It needs to be input correctly, because any errors on your part on putting that information will create delays and will require rescheduling. During peak season, it's very difficult to get appointments once you need to reschedule. It's also hard during peak season because the H2Bs are coming alongside with the H2As, and the H2As process. Sometimes one employer may have 800 workers, and that's just one employer, and they're all coming in at the same time. And the reason we know that is because we handle a lot of the H2As at the same time. So when there isn't any appointments available, what we do is we go to different consulates to try and get you the workers as soon as possible, because we know that it's important for you to come through with your commitments, with your bids and all that. So we're going to Nuevo Laredo, Monterrey, and Matamoros are the standard consulates, but we also are going to Mexico City, Guadalajara, Hermosillo, and Nogales if we need to go there. So we are available 24/7. We work on, our staff in Mexico works holidays and weekends when we have appointments that are scheduled on Mondays. So we're always available to you. You can always reach me on my cell. We have, you can WhatsApp, whatever. We also are a U.S. company, which is different than sometimes most of our competitors. And we are liable and accountable to all U.S. laws, just like you are. And I personally do the recruitment myself, so that way you know you can count on somebody that's not going to be charging workers. You can imagine all these workers, these illegals that have come in, they cannot go back to Mexico. But the value of a visa is like winning the lottery, because with this visa they can come and go multiple times and they can go back and see their families. So if you've got somebody in Mexico that is unscrupulous, they can be charging these workers for the visa whatever they want, because if they're paying cartel members $5,000 or more, what is the value of a visa? I'm a U.S. citizen and I'm personally doing all the recruitment for you. And basically, if there's any issues, we try and work it out, between the employer and the worker. The consulate, what they do is on the visas that are issued, they have a QR code with all the labor laws. So if you're not coming through with the amount of hours or overtime or whatever, they have that number there accessible, and the consulate encourages them to do that. With any worker that I recruit, I always tell them there's always a solution that can be worked out. So they call me and then I can call you, or if there's any issues, I'm always there to be able to help you as a liaison, for that. We also have different services that we offer. If you're required to do pre-duty anti-doping, we have a lab and a doctor that does that for the workers when they get to Monterrey. And if there's any positives, we let you know, so that way we can go ahead and take them out, so that the visa, the passport does not go into the consulate, so that way you don't lose out on the MRV fee. So we're always available. When your workers get there, we let you know who has arrived, who hasn't. If you need for us to contact your workers, you send us the names and we will do that for you. We also have transportation so that you don't have to worry, whether it's a charter, a van, or if there's nothing else available and they're going to Maine, we can assist with transportation so that you can run your business and you don't have to worry about that. The buses are equipped with GPS, so basically we're going to send you that by email, so you will always know where the bus is at any time. And plus, if there's any delays or anything, you can always call us. If there's any issues, you can always reach us. We've been in the transportation business just as long as we've been doing the visas, and our bus company is a U.S. bus company. We also do the school districts and the universities, so you can rest assured that it's got the licenses and insurance and DOT and all of that. So basically, when you get your approval notice, it is incumbent that you call us right away. If you send us an email, we will respond to you within 1 to 2 days. If you don't hear from us, call us, because maybe we did not receive your email. So it's always important to maintain contact with my office, to call if you need anything, if there's any substitutions, any changes, anything, any questions, but always, reach out to us, because just because you send an email doesn't mean that we have received it. So it's very important. Communication is key. And as always, we try and do everything to get you your workers during your time of need as fast as we can. Like I said, the consulate has only certain spaces available, and we work around what they have available, and we will tell you what's available, and that way you can decide which consulate, will be best for your workers, where they need to be, and all of that. So if you need any of our services, please reach out to us, and we can start to explain and get the paperwork going, so that way when you do get your petition, there's no delays in getting the appointment.
On the note of the transportation, one of the reasons why we started a bus company was because in the state of Texas, if you rent Kershaw bus lines and they have an accident, the people who contracted the company are just as liable as the owner of the company. So when I first started, I was subcontracting bus companies, and they were not in the up and up. So that's why we started our own bus company with vans and mainly buses. And during the off season, like my wife said, we do universities and school districts, church groups and whatnot. That's the main reason why we have a bus company, to make sure that our buses are insured, our drivers have the ELD logbooks and whatnot. Another thing, going back to the workers, if we see something that's not right or kosher with a worker, we'll call you and say, hey, you know what, there's something going on here. Do you want to proceed with this worker? And we've had instances where some of our staff has encountered crew leaders or other workers charging monies to the worker, and we'll call the employer, hey, this is happening. If they go in, they can shut you down. So we vet those events and try to avoid that happening, because like I said, you guys are our priority and we're here to serve you guys. At this time, we would like to take any questions or any comments or anything that we can help you with, because I know it's a long day and we just want to say hello and offer our services. And we have some packets there, and I can pass them out if whoever would like one.
We also have an excellent rapport with the consulate since we've been doing this for so long. Also, we have our congressman, his cell number, so if there's any issues with anything, he's always available for us.
Thank you, and God bless.
All right. Let's switch this other mic out. We're getting close to the end here. I did want to mention our processors. We do have 4. Monarch couldn't be here and this year, but we have 4. They are reputable. They are very competitive with their pricing, and we do send you information on our processors. You can choose your processors, and but we send you their contact information. Melissa was bringing up to me that they want you to use, as far as scheduling and processing the workers, their H2 email. Is that right? Is that in your packet that you're giving out?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We send it to your office, so when you send out the information, it's there.
So we'll send out the correct one there, but a lot of you have maybe Melissa's personal or Richie's personal email, and even though they'll get to it eventually, they have a full-time person that basically coordinates with the employers, and that is Estella, right? And she is at that H2 email, and she'll find out, get your questions answered, and get right back to you. And I mentioned to you, we do have our memorandum that our processors are in agreement with. And so for us to be able to do that and have that quick turnaround on emails and calls, make sure, and we'll make sure we're giving you the right email to get that done, the right person to contact. And so what we do is, right when we get notice that your I-129 petition has been receipted by USCIS, we know you're going to be approved within 2 weeks. We go ahead and get that receipt number, and we begin finding out from our employer who they're going to use for their processing. And you send back and you say, well, I'm going to use this particular processor. I've talked to them and I've agreed to use them. And that way, as soon as we get that I-797 approval from USCIS, we immediately email that down to your designated processor with a copy of the job order that I showed you a copy of earlier, or a template. So we have the job order on there. They can translate this into Spanish and give it to the worker, and so the worker knows all of the terms of employment. The job order cannot be changed, as I mentioned earlier, but and we also send the approval down to that processor, and so they can immediately start getting on scheduling your appointment and contacting your workers and getting them up here to you as quickly as possible. We're happy to have everybody here today, as far as all of the employers, but also all of our processors. I do want to go over a few last things before we close. We're getting close to closing time. We'll let everybody get on the road or get on their flights or get back to their rooms. I did want to go over a few things. We're on page 37 on the outline, and down there at 25, I think the selected statistics on Exhibit 30 are worth looking at. And we'll look at a few of these exhibits. And I would in your spare time, or if you're having trouble sleeping and you want something to help you go to sleep, you can read some of these DOL fact sheets and things like that. But anyway, the selected statistics, it shows Texas is the #1 user of H2B visas. We represent clients all over the United States because immigration is a federal practice. If an attorney is licensed in one state, he can represent clients in that federal practice in all 50 states. And so we do represent clients from all over the United States. We represent a lot of clients in Texas because Texas is one of the biggest users. We have a lot of clients in Florida, Colorado, all of these states, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Michigan, a lot in Ohio, Utah, but it shows the percentage of visas for each of those states. And then landscaping is the top industry. 37% of all H2B visas go to landscape companies. And then construction is also, about 3% more. So you're talking about 40% between construction and landscaping. And so that's a reason that I focus quite a bit now, my practice, on landscaping and construction. It's a large part, and they're clearly, usually it's very clear that they're seasonal or peak load businesses. It gives you some of the statistics on how many were certified and denied over there to the left, and it shows some of the largest users of H2B visas. Now this is a little dated. It was 2022 is the last time they did these H2B statistics, but so you see a lot of builders, you see different professional services. Brightview is the largest landscaper in the country, so they use over 1,000 visas, 1,200 visas themselves in 2022. They're doing more than that now. And So you can get an idea of some of the different industries that use H2B. Then I'd like to look also at Exhibit 27, if you'll flip back a few pages, and you'll see the eligible countries list. And we get questions a lot of times on, well, can I bring some workers from South Africa? Well, yes, you can. Usually if they are state sponsors of terrorism, you're not going to be able to bring people from those countries. A lot of communist countries, they won't let you bring workers from communist countries. And then countries that don't repatriate their workers, they'll take them off of the eligible country list. So, if they come over here illegally and then we try to send them back, we find them and we try to send them back and they won't take them back, they'll cut them off of the eligible country list. But all of your Central American countries are eligible. Of course, Mexico. I brought workers from India. I brought workers from Europe. I brought workers from Africa. I brought workers from the Caribbean and from all over. But most of the workers historically come from Mexico and Central America. We have workers that come every year from South America, Brazil, different countries down there. And so we can get you workers from many of these countries. Also, these countries that we mentioned that are the supplemental visa countries, the named countries for supplemental visas, those are important countries to start looking at as far as bringing in a workforce that is an alternative workforce for you in case you get capped out for your Mexico workers. You can bring workers from Ecuador now, from Colombia, from Costa Rica, and we are now processing workers with full-time people there in Guatemala, El Salvador. We'll start up here within the next 6 months in Honduras. Of course, we have several processors in Mexico. I believe Solstice and Monarch also do distance processing for those foreign countries. You'll have to check with them on that as far as if it's not in Mexico. But and any processor can process in any country, but a lot of them seem to kind of specialize in certain countries. And so you might just check with them and see, can they do it, and what do they charge for it, and compare with the different processors. We can bring them from anywhere in the world, so if you're interested in any of those other countries. One other thing, let me see if there's a few more things here I wanted to go over. Travel and visa expenses, we don't have to look there, but they are required to be paid for by the employer. You might look at that Exhibit 15. The visa validity period, it's usually going to, your H2A and H2B visas are going to be valid as far as presence for 10 days past the end date of employment. And the reason is they're going to give the workers 10 days to return to Mexico or Guatemala or whatever, so to pack up and do whatever they have to do to go leave the country. You don't want to tell the workers that. You want to get them on the bus as quickly as possible, because you don't want them saying, I got 10 days, I'm going to go visit my cousin in Houston, and we're going to go party, and then they end up getting in trouble and don't go back when they're supposed to. So it's best to try to get them back as quickly as possible, but you do have 10 days. During that 10 days, they cannot work. They can only pack and get ready to go back. And I did want to go over one last thing in closing, and that has to do with firing or laying off workers. And I get asked this a lot. Can I fire a worker if he's not working out? And the answer is yes and no. You can fire somebody if they're clearly doing something wrong or something they're not supposed to do. And it doesn't have to be anything all that serious. It helps to have policies and procedures, like these are things we don't allow. These are things that can result in immediate termination. But how you go about firing a H2B worker is a little bit different than you might do with an at-will employee. So an at-will employee is when somebody's an at-will employee, they can be fired for cause, for good cause, bad cause, or no cause at all. You can just say, sorry, this isn't working out. Here's your check. And you can do that. And I don't recommend you do it like that. I recommend you do it the same way that we're going to advise you to do on an H2B worker, because employment laws are getting more strict all the time, and workers' rights and things like that. So what we recommend you do is, first of all, have some policies and procedures on things that are not allowed. Like you might say, we don't allow workers to talk on their cell phones during work hours. And let's say that's in your policies and procedures, and you go out on a job site and check on it, and there's a worker just talking away on his cell phone, and it's not a break or anything, and he's not working, he's just talking on his cell phone. You can say, hey, we mentioned to you you're not supposed to do that. You can talk during the break, or you can talk when you're not at work, but when you're at work, you're supposed to be working. And so he says, okay, and then you go out there a week later, same guy's talking on his cell phone. The second time after you've given him a verbal warning, you want to give him a written warning. And you want to say, and put his name on there and say, this is to advise you that you've been warned already that you should not be talking on your cell phone during work hours. If you're found talking on your cell phone during work hours, again, it may be cause for termination, right? So now this guy's got a written warning. You've written him up. You have him sign that. If he won't sign it, have his crew leader sign it, And that somebody can say this person was given a written warning and put that in their employee file. Now you've got a paper trail, right? Because even though you gave him a warning, you want something in writing so that if you go out there again and the same guy's talking on a cell phone and you're saying, hey, that's it, we're done. You need to pack your stuff and you're going home. And after he's fired, he calls DOL and says, I was fired for no good reason and everything, and they owe me the 3/4 guarantee and everything, and then all of a sudden you don't have any paper trail. I recommend you at least give a warning, and have something in writing to where there's a paper trail there, and you can say, no, we fired him for cause. He had 2 warnings. He wouldn't, abide by our requirements, and so we let him go. Then you're not have no responsibility. That was a fired for cause situation. Then, if you have things that a reasonable employer would have fired anybody for. So let's say it's not in your policies, you have no policies and procedures, but you had a worker come in and get into a fist fight, and beat up another, employee, or did something inappropriate with another employee, or came in stumbling drunk with alcohol all over their breath. You don't have to give a warning, not even once, for things that any reasonable employer would have fired them for on the spot, right? And so they're stealing company, you caught them stealing company, stuff, equipment or materials or whatever. You saw him in his back seat or of his car. You can fire him on the spot and call the cops, and that any reasonable employer would fire somebody for that, right? But you do want to write it up and everything and have a report in their file. Usually, if at all possible, you want a paper trail that they got some warning, but the more egregious stuff that any reasonable employer would fire them on the spot, you can fire them on the spot. So the answer is yes, you can fire H2B workers. You want to make sure that there's not going to be any recourse to come back on you for the 3/4 guarantee. You want to make sure that you're doing it for cause. If you lay off workers, you are subject to the 3/4 guarantee. So let's say you lost a big contract, and that contract was the one that was going to keep them here till December 20th. Most of your work usually ends up around Thanksgiving, and you don't know if you're going to need these workers till December 20th because you lost that big contract. Call us, and we can figure out on the 3/4 guarantee when that 3/4 guarantee is going to be fulfilled, and you're free to go ahead and lay them off because you fulfilled the 3/4 guarantee, right? And one thing I tell our processors, and I tell you, and I tell a lot of people, I work for you as the employer. I want to make sure your protected, you're taken care of. We care for the workers. I think you can see that. We care about their economic improvement. We care about their well-being while they're here. But at the bottom line, you're my client, and you're the one I'm looking out for, so I don't want there to be any problems that you have with the H2B visa program. So if you think you're going to be running up against some type of violation, or maybe you're going to be not fulfilling the 3/4 guarantee, just call me. We can advise you as far as when it's going to kick in under that 3 months, how many hours they've worked and everything, and when you can let them go without any economic liability at all. And but like I said, I've never had a client that had to pay the 3/4 guarantee, so I'm not that concerned about it. But anytime you're going to do something out of the ordinary, my legal advice is included in our services. You don't have to pay extra by the hour for me to give you legal advice on the H2B program. Now, if it's about something unrelated, you might, but if it's about H2B or these workers, you can get good advice. I mentioned selling a business. You don't want to do that without talking to me. Find out if it's an asset sell or a successor in interest. You know, any major moves like that, check with me. Usually there's a way to do it right, and I'll be glad to spend time with you and make sure you get good advice. So before we dismiss, any additional questions on anything for me? Wow. All right, everybody. Well, we got a spare 10 minutes, and thank you all for coming out. And we're glad to have you as clients and look forward to a good, successful H2B year. Bye-bye.